Okay, welcome everybody. I am Garrett Sussman. I'm the Senior Content Marketing Manager of Grade Us, and we are having this webinar today. I am joined by Phil Rozek of Local Visibility System. Thank you for joining us today, Phil.
Thanks so much for having me today, Garrett.
I'm excited. So today we're going to talk about Google reviews. Now, Phil basically runs a consultancy and agency, and he has this really great blog. Highly recommend you check it out, localvisibilitysystem.com, in which he basically writes about everything that's going on with local search, a lot of focus on Google. Earlier this month, he wrote a really interesting article about what do you do if Google decides to monetize, and make people pay for local search features. We're not going to talk about that today, but just in terms of that post, what do you think, Phil, before we dive into the meat of our webinar today with Google monetizing?
Well, I realize probably nobody will read the post after I say this, but 80% of what you should do is just basically the things you would do anyway. And hedge your bets a little. Develop some not only non-maps sources of Google visibility, but also some non-Google sources of visibility if possible. And reviews are a big part of what I called in my post the bunker plan. Because at least unlike with rankings, with reviews at least you have the ability to get customers out of the deal, and for those people to be the types who are predisposed to tell others. So, that you run a great business, you offer great service, etc. And so when you get a pile of reviews, you kind of build up your word of mouth power. Whereas with rankings, maybe you do, maybe you get customers who tell their friends and their family how great you are, but with people who care about review, when you have customers who care about reviews, those people are more likely than not, A, to leave you a review when you've helped them, B, to tell other people. So I think reviews, for me at least, and for my clients, reviews factor pretty prominently in the local SEO bunker plan, where in other words, what do you do if Google goes 100% pay to play at some point, or 60% pay to play?
And I think that's a really great segue into the topic of the webinar today, because I think before you start talking about generating reviews and different strategies, it's always good to think about the purpose of reviews. Like, why are you getting reviews in the first place? It's not just a game. They have value. And I think that when you're thinking about the type of review that you're getting, obviously, when someone takes the time to evaluate your business and talk about, specific experiences that they had to show other people why they might want to solicit your business, or, on the negative side, why not? That's the purpose reviews truly serve. And now the side effect of that is, to your point, if people are reading the reviews, you might get a customer out of that, because they'll see, oh, this other person had a great experience. They shared why they had it. That has a lot more value than just a bunch of star ratings.
Absolutely. I mean, customers like crunchy bits of detail, and they don't necessarily want to know simply that they should pick this business over another business, but specifically why they should. And I think just as Google has kind of gamified local reviews, where you have local guides and you get free swag if you write enough reviews, even if they're terrible. Business owners have kind of gamified themselves, where they get so obsessed with just the body count. How many reviews can they rack up, and not necessarily how good are the reviews. There's not much quality control necessarily, and business owners, in my experience, often get hung up on just how many reviews can you pile up, which does matter, but it's only sort of one arrow in the quiver.
Right, it's just a part of the equation. So basically, just how this is going to work, everyone, is I'm going to kind of suggest a few of these different strategies that we've heard when it comes to getting reviews for your business, or for a lot of folks who are agencies for your clients. Phil's then just going to kind of touch on why that may or may not be a bad strategy. There is a lot of myths generated in the industry, or you see online that someone's saying, oh, you absolutely can't do this, or you should do this. And it's really tricky to, kind of weed out the chaff, to figure out what is actually the case based on, what Google says, and then just common sense, why you might want to or not want to do something. I do want to let you know that we're going to try to have a little time at the end for question and answer. So do feel free to add to the chat or the Q&A. And if we do see something, that feels relevant while we're going through it and you leave a chat, I'll definitely try to pitch that to Phil. So if it's okay with you, Phil, let's dive into the first strategy.
Oh, well, we had our one condition of the discussion, remember, about
Yes.
Google? Yeah, basically the premise of my talk today is why you should follow the best practices, even if you don't care what Google's policies are. Now, I'm not saying they don't matter, but Google has all kinds of do's and don'ts regarding what kinds of what can be in reviews, and also how you should and should not ask for them. And so, of course, Google has all kinds of problems and lets all kind of crappy reviews into the local ecosystem that they shouldn't. So the basic idea is, I'm not saying that the Google guidelines don't matter, but when people say, oh, you should not try such and such review strategy just because Google says you shouldn't, I'm here to give you other reasons why you maybe
so that's the rule.
Should or should not should or should not follow a what is, at least in theory, best practice. I'm not saying the Google rules don't matter, but what other reasons are there you might want to follow or abandon a certain best practice? So at least for us today, I think it's kind of like a swear jar, where every time you say the G word, you put $1 into the jar. So I'm going to try not to cite, well, because Google says not to, as a reason not to do anything.
So that's pretty much the rule. The rule is Phil is not really allowed to say you can't do something because Google says you can. He's got to give us the other reasons. So
yeah, and not that Google doesn't matter, but I'm just trying to give you other reasons maybe worth trying to stay on the straight and narrow.
Exactly. So with the first one, diving right in, and this has actually come up with a lot of great us customers frequently, because their clients, and this is a tricky thing when you're an agency working with your clientele, your clients might want to do something and you need a reason outside of Google doesn't say not to do it, why you should or should not. But the first one is using contests to earn a review. You hear that a lot, is this idea of, well, why don't I just go and create a contest asking people for Google reviews? What do you say to that?
Well, it depends what kind of contest it is. Contest is not a contest. If it is a contest where you try to get a little bit of friendly rivalry going between your employees, your paralegals, your nurses, your technicians, your colleagues, and see who can get the most or best reviews, and maybe whose name can be dropped the most times in a given body of reviews, that's okay. I mean, at least insofar as Google, doesn't have any rule against it. And it's not, to me at least, I guess it's a judgment call. It's not some ethical transgression. You're just trying to, it's just common sense. And to me at least, smart marketing, just to see, rather than have kind of a centralized review czar, if you will, one designated person to try to encourage all the reviews and ask all the people, you have some boots on the ground. Maybe the business owner or the marketing person is not the only one trying to rustle up reviews. So to me, if you need to do a contest to get those boots on the ground, that's okay. And I have never seen any downside in doing that. When my clients do that, because some of them do. So that's one species of contest, and I would say that's okay. The other species of contest is, leave us a glowing 5-star review and enter to be one of 500 customers who may or may not win a $10 Starbucks gift card. If the prize is too lame, if it's too small, nobody's going to write you a review. Some people may feel offended. They may say, well, I would have been glad to write you a review, but you didn't have to bribe me. Now I'm going to mention that in my review of you. Um, and if it works too well, you have a lot of people who are just jumping through hoops. They're writing either the bare minimum or a review that looks phony and that doesn't pass your sniffer test just because they want the gift card. And that's not a good outcome. So really, for me, the issue, if that's the kind of review contest you're considering, I would not do it, because if it doesn't work well, it's a problem, and if it works too well, it's also a problem.
Exactly. I completely agree on both accounts. On the employee thing, I think there's value in that. I think one caveat, which I think you'd agree with, is this idea that if you are going to have some sort of internal program, and this is just true no matter what, is to educate your employees on how to ask for a review in a way that, doesn't leave a stain on the company's mark in the first place. Like, you should always generally kind of educate your employees on what that conversation should look like, and how to do it in kind of a smooth way as opposed to an uncomfortable or solicitous way.
Exactly. I mean, arguably, I'm jumping the shark now and getting into more business practices and less kind of specific strategies to rustle up reviews. But ideally, your employees or nurses or technicians or whomever don't feel as though your fortunes are not their fortunes, and the fortunes of your company are not their fortunes, and there's some benefit to them in getting more customers or more happy customers, if only customers with fewer issues. Because if you get a good corpus of reviews going, you attract more of the right customers, and at least people know why they should or should not pick you. So your reviews can serve to weed out some of the people you don't want and get more of the people you do want. And so, in most cases, the employees would, all things being equal, assuming they have to work the same number of hours, they have every motivation not to deal with customers, clients, patients who are just a pain in the neck. And so, ideally, you have some built-in kind of motivations for the employees to help you rustle up a few reviews. But again, that's more of a business practice. I mean, it's not necessarily a strategic consideration, but it can serve to your advantage or to your disadvantage. So I think it's at least relevant to the conversation today.
And I think on the customer side, so Sherry actually had a suggestion in the context of contests. I'd be curious to hear your opinion on this. Is she suggested that she might reverse the process in the sense that you offer a great promotion just in general, and then after the customer takes advantage of it, then you ask for.
Hey, Garrett,
Sorry.
I didn't. Oh yeah, no problem. Yeah, I think I missed about the last 15 words. I think I got the gist of it though, where you sort of you give customers a kind of an after the fact bribe, if you will, just as a way of saying thank you. And I've had some clients do that. Obviously, I don't want to name names, but essentially, it's a jumping off point for them to ask, "Hey, thank you so much for the Google review. Can you also, here's a bit of wampum for you. By the way, we would love also a review on BBB, Angie's List, Facebook, Yelp. Are you a Yelp reviewer?" So that's an ethical gray area. It just between you and me and the lamppost, it does seem to work pretty well. Not that it's the kind of thing that I encourage, but rather it's the kind of thing where I said, probably don't want to do that. And of course, the client does it. And of course, it works very well. And so I look like a complete idiot. I wouldn't necessarily incentivize the review afterwards. I mean, I guess it's not incentivizing them. You're just rewarding them. You're saying thank you. It makes things a little complicated, because sometimes people can update their reviews. They go in and they edit them. I mean, it's rare, but they may say, whereas the initial review, maybe they left after the first time they did business with you. And then if they've worked with you for another 5 years, it would be great if they updated the review to say, "Hey, I've worked with Phil or Garrett for 5 years." And obviously there's a feature in Yelp where you can do that. Can't really do that as well in Google. But the point is, it makes your interactions with that particular customer a little a little dicey.
Transactional,
especially if they're a repeat customer or client or patient, and you did work for them, and then they left you a good review, and then you compensate them for it. I mean, depending on the profession, that might not even be allowed. And it also, if you didn't have to incentivize them to begin with to write the review, then it's not like they're gonna say, you know what, Phil didn't give me a gift card as a thank you for my review, so I'm going to bump him down to 4 stars. It's not going to happen. I mean, if anything, it cheapens the relationship just a little bit, and they don't get to feel as though they did you a favor. And
what if they do it before the review, before they even leave the review? What if it's like a contest, just like a general promotional contest, and then they've engaged with you, and then maybe in your follow-up email you kind of throw it in there?
Yeah, I suppose the less tied the compensation, the gift, the swag, whatever, is to the review, the better. I mean, it's not a bad idea. I mean, it does. Again, especially if you use that as a jumping off point for thank you for the Google review. Can you write us a review on these other sites? It does work. I suppose it's just a case by case question. I mean, generally, I would steer people away from that, but I think the strategy does have its place in the world too.
Which I think is relevant in terms of the next strategy we were going to discuss in general is just incentivizing reviews. So is there anything just in any capacity where that's appropriate? I mean, we're talking about Google, but there are other review sites that actually, like have their own programs for it. So is there any situation where incentivizing reviews works, or is that always a bad strategy, and maybe why?
My answers are frustratingly similar to my last answers. Kind of two sides of the same coin. Yeah, again, it does work. I've seen it work for some clients of mine who have chosen to disregard my advice or kind of apply it selectively and cherry pick, the parts they like. I'm not saying it doesn't work. It's very risky, though. I mean, again, it's a strategy that can blow up in your face if people are offended, kind of clutching their pearls, saying, "How dare you try to bribe me for my 5-star review? I would have left you one anyway." So you want to avoid potential blowback there, where people say, or even if your competitors get wind of it, there's a game of telephone where if customers somehow let on that you cross their palm with silver, and then competitors learn that they will drag you for that. They will find a way to let it be known that you somehow pay for reviews, even if that's not what you're doing, even if you're not trying. Again, directly to incentivize people. So the point is, it can work if your goal is to, again, work up the body count and simply get more reviews. It can work pretty well to that end. The biggest danger, besides just the potential backfiring, is that the reviews aren't very good. People are just jumping through hoops. They want to get the swag, and they will either write a review that's phony, where it just sounds too good to be true, or a review that's minimalist, where it's like, one sentence, maybe it doesn't even have a period at the end. It's like an eBay review. It's like, and then that you say, hey, well, yeah, that wasn't a very good review. And you're like, well, hey, you said if I wrote you a review, I would get a $50 gift card. I wrote you a review. What are you complaining about? So you set yourself up for a conundrum there too, where either the review is too good or it's minimalist and it's clear people are going through the motions.
I think that's fair, and I think that people definitely need to think about it. To your point, it's tricky just because it might work, but if for the time being,
right.
But is it a long-term sustainable strategy? Are there potential backfires? You have to weigh those pros and cons. So switching gears a little, this is kind of a big one in our industry, review management industry, which is the whole topic of review gating. So for those who aren't familiar, that's the whole idea of segmenting your happy customers and your unhappy customers, basically pointing your happy customers to write a review and having your unhappy customers just try to, kind of resolve their issue internally without them writing a negative review. So why is it a bad strategy to review gate?
Well, I want to preface this by saying Google does not call it review gating. I suppose I need to slip $1 into the swear jar for using the G word, but people always use it in the context of Google, so that's why I'm bringing it up. It's kind of a term that us local SEO geeks have latched onto, and I think it's somewhat descriptive, and it describes the process pretty well. People, business owners want to serve as gatekeepers so that at least, they have the option to influence their fortunes a little bit. If they can kind of see a bad review, a potentially very bad review kind of coming down the pike, that it's not a major concern for me. And the main reason is, several main reasons, I suppose. One is it's kind of unnecessary, because the foaming at the mouth angry people, the bad reviewers, the negative reviewers, know full well how to write you a bad review already. It's not like you send them an email or you're using third-party ORM software and they just have an epiphany like, what? You mean I can write a bad review of this business and here's how? This is amazing. It's not going to happen. I mean, a lot of the time the unhappy customers either are just not the reviewing types, or they have already written you a bad review. And the whole reason you're using the ORM software or you're using the review gating strategy is specifically to avoid more of those people. And so the damage has been done in a lot of cases. The other reason is if you're the kind of business that feels naked without your review gating, and you just can't fathom the idea of trying to encourage reviews without some sort of mechanism to separate the unhappies from the happies, then you have bigger problems to worry about. People, too many bad reviewers, too many bad unhappy customers for X number of happy customers, and that's a problem. And review gating would only go so far in remedying that. So, in general, I wouldn't be concerned. Also, most of the review sites, it's worth noting, say nothing about that. I mean, Yelp does and Google does. That's it. I mean, granted, the other sites are the Wild West, and there are no rules, and you can basically do anything, and there's no, for better and for worse, and there's no oversight.
And Yelp's on the other side. I mean, they say no solicitation of reviews at all, which is a whole other can of worms.
Exactly. Yeah, they say, I mean, the review gating policy, if you will, has always been baked into Yelp's draconian rules. So it's really, again, I mentioned Google just because it is strictly a Google question. Google has failed to do anything about real problems in the reviews ecosystem. I mean, it's just a super fun site in terms of the amount of garbage and number of toxic reviews and just blatant open spam. So, Google has bigger fish to fry, and I think Google, I wrote a post on this last year where I explained I dissected the review gating rule a little bit, but Google doesn't want to do anything about reviews, clearly, because it's just such a mess. So they want software companies like Grade Us, for example, to do some or most of its enforcement. So if they can crack down on the software makers and kind of make them sort of follow a kind of a review funnel that is kosher by Google standards, then they've at least solved a little bit of the problem.
It's interesting on
But
our
they're
end
not going
because
to. That's where the enforcement seems to begin and end on
well,
Google.
that's what I was going to say is like we haven't seen any sort of consequences through our customers, thankfully. Glenn actually asked, from your experience with clients, what is the penalty that you'll get hit with from Google or Yelp if they do find out that you're doing it? Do you have any sort of kind of insights into what that would even be if there is anything?
I'll let you know once I see one. I certainly, I have no idea. I mean, it's hard to say with. It's certainly hard to say with Google because they just let. I mean, Google used to be at at one time, as you know, as bad as or worse than Yelp at filtering, but that lasted for like a year, and then it's been the Wild West ever since. And Google still does filter reviews, but there does not seem to be any rhyme or reason. And again, I've had some clients who have cherry picked my advice and done. I don't tell people not to review gate. I don't tell them to do it. It's complicated. It's kind of a business decision they have to make. I mean, I tend to take a hands-off approach partly because it's unnecessary. It's not like giving your reviews performance-enhancing drugs. I mean, it's not going to make that much of a difference if it works well. If it doesn't work at all, then then that's that. I mean, obviously, if Yelp gets wind of your buying reviews on Craigslist, they seem to have people lurking. Then you have a problem. Potentially, you have a public shaming by Yelp. But that's always been the case, and that's not an issue specific to review gating. There are a lot of ways to hurt yourself on Yelp. With Google, I suppose I'm just speculating, but Google seems to have there seems to be no bite behind that bark. Again, Google seems to want to scare software companies into enforcing its rules, whereas it will not enforce its own rules. At least that's the way it seems, having looked at a lot of reviews, good and bad, from clients and just businesses in the wild.
Yeah, and that's been our philosophy. I remember our founder, John Hall, his thought process was always, in some ways, review segmentation, review gating was good business because Carmen Rain Hudson, who I know you've worked with and writes for us on our blog, did this really great survey of a bunch of different people of why they write bad reviews. And she basically found that the people who wrote bad reviews, it was always a last, there are a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, it's a last, kind of outlet of where they didn't get an issue resolved. And they only left a bad review because they were, something bad happened to them that they didn't feel was fair, but they reached out to the company. And John's philosophy was like, well, good business is if someone's upset with their experience and they let you know, it's an opportunity to kind of fix that situation, especially if you were the ones who wronged them, and then you're keeping it private, but you're also actually taking care of your customers and listening to their feedback.
That's a fantastic point, and I agree. Yeah, I mean, as you said, and as John said, there tend to be warning signs, and most business owners are only basically broadsided and flat punched in the side of the head by a negative review when they're just not paying attention. And of course, it seems to come out of nowhere because they weren't paying attention. I mean, to your point, it is also an offer. I'm not saying invite bad reviews because it's like, well, what are you afraid of? No, I mean, of course, bad reviews, especially if they're credible, are very damaging, or can be if you have too many of them compared to the number of glowing reviews. But most businesses that do review that are good at encouraging reviews because based on merit as opposed to spam, they impress people with their good reviews. But there are very few businesses that also impress people with their bad reviews, where people can look at would-be customers look at the bad reviews and say either, okay, the worst review I can find is about a silly complaint from just some whiny customer who has nothing bigger and more consequential to complain about. Okay, that's pretty good. If if the the most negative review I can find of the plumbing company is that one of their technicians arrived 10 minutes late. That's not too damning. So
Right.
that's what I mean when I say you can impress people with bad reviews. I'm referring to that. Or even if it's a completely unreasonable customer, somebody who, the type who like writes in all caps and doesn't punctuate the review. If that is the least happy customer who wrote you a review, you're doing pretty well, because then people say, okay, this person is clearly a goofball. And if the only type of person who doesn't love this business is a goofball, then they must be pretty good.
Right. And obviously, we're not talking about this topic in terms of review gem, but it's also an opportunity for the business owners to respond professionally and show how you handle those situations. One quick thing before we move on, Glenn just he's like, sorry to beat a dead horse, but does Yelp allow software company derived reviews to be posted to Yelp? And I would just quickly say to that, technically Yelp says, no, you can't ask for a review in any capacity. So whether it's through a software company you're asking, like technically it's not okay, but I don't know explicitly if Yelp can detect whether or not a review comes from a review or online review management platform like ours or anywhere else.
Yeah, what Yelp says and what Yelp can do are very different things. And I'm not encouraging anybody, obviously, to flout Yelp's guidelines. They're there. I don't think they're common sense. So I don't think you're somehow stupid if you disregard pieces of Yelp's guidelines that just are ludicrous. So I'm not casting any judgment on anybody there. But yeah, Yelp seemingly, from what I've seen, has no way to sniff out whether somebody was asked for a review at all, or if he or she was asked for a review, was it through software or just a thank you note in the mail. Yelp seemingly has no way to detect that. I mean, Yelp basically, with the exception of reviews that are just beyond the pale and that use incredibly insulting.
Any fake review.
Well, Yelp is pretty lax about the fake reviews even. Mm-hmm. Sad to say, but unless you have a Yelp review that uses like racial slurs or something, where Yelp won't remove it automatically, but may remove it once flagged. The only thing that determines, in my experience, that determines whether a Yelp review is filtered algorithmically or not is the reviewer. How active is he or she? If he or she has written more than, say, 5 to 10 reviews over a period of time, as opposed to blasting out 5 or 10 of them in a weekend, that person's reviews are much less likely to get filtered. So the point is, if you use a software, whether Grade Us or any other solution, and you have Yelp as one of the options, and you send the email to somebody who is an active Yelper, meaning he or she has maybe, let's say, 10 or more reviews to his or her name, that person's review is not probably will not get filtered. And if it does, it has, in my experience, nothing to do with the fact that you used software to ask him or her, but it has to do with just the reviewer's activity. So the long-winded way of saying no, software does not make your Yelp reviews get filtered.
I think that's great. So yeah, moving along, because it's hard not to just talk about the whole review gating thing. I think that's the most interesting thing going on in review management, but do have a lot of other interesting strategies. So just moving to the next one, and I feel like this one's straightforward, but maybe you can kind of suss it out. It's having your friends, family, or an employee write reviews for the business.
That one's pretty simple. Compared to review gating, that's not too hairy of a topic. I get the temptation of fake it till you make it, but it's another high risk strategy. I mean, setting aside the potential Google concerns and the possible fact that it's illegal in your profession, or could get you disbarred, or somehow in hot water with licensing powers that be. The issue is you're asking your friends, your family, whomever, either to write a review that's vague and mushy saying, Phil's a great guy, you should hire him, or lie through their teeth. So they can't tell the truth about you and their relationship to you, the business owner, without just making you look stupid. Like, doesn't this guy have any customers? And you don't want that. So, Google probably won't. There, I guess I have to put another dollar. But Google won't do anything about it. So the question is, should you, even if Google, just because you can doesn't mean you should. I mean, you have to assume that people, that everybody who ever wants to do business with you will read your online reviews and will dig through them rather than like read the most recent 2 of them. And also you have to assume that people are skeptical and that they will decide, I mean, it's one thing if they see, your first review from 8 years ago was from somebody who with the same last name as yours. They'll be like, okay, fine, I get it. This business owner has a great pile of reviews since then, and clearly those are from customers. That's okay, I suppose. I mean, really the question is, do you want reviews that impress people, or are you just fixated on the body count? If you're just fixated on the body count, you can probably get away with asking people who are close to you for a review. But if you want to impress people, don't do it.
Well, the other thing with that, and it kind of leads to Diego made a comment, but a lot of it has to do with whether someone else out there is actually actively reporting your business, because that like throws another wrench in the gears. He was saying that he had a friend on one of his Yelp reviews of a friend's business was removed, and the reason for removal was a conflict of interest, which he thought was ridiculous. And if I had to guess, it's probably because someone else reported that. And like if you have the specific reason other than like Yelp just like picking a reason out of thin air, right?
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing to know about Yelp's conflict of interest is they will only, in my experience, they will only remove a review based on conflict of interest if it says in the review, Phil is my cousin, I think he's a great guy, you should hire him. If that's all Yelp has to go on in the case of removing a review for conflict of interest. They don't know if somebody is my cousin or my friend if he or she doesn't say so in the review. So again, it's back to the conundrum of either the review is vague and it doesn't disclose the relationship, or the reviewer has to lie. I mean, Yelp. I mean, I get Diego's issue with Yelp because the enforcement is just so uneven. I mean, there are many reviews on there with a conflict of interest, written by somebody with a conflict of interest, that are not removed. And so the difference between them, and the only way Yelp can try to sort the wheat from the chaff, is in saying like, well, okay, where are the reviews where they admit their relationship to the business that is being reviewed?
It doesn't seem as bad if they're transparent either. It's like they're being transparent. They're showing it out there. So if anything, that hurts.
Yeah. I mean, being transparent is better than not. And I guess if you said, Phil, I want to ask friends and family for reviews, do I have them lie or do I have them write vague, mushy reviews? I'd go with the vague, mushy reviews, but it still doesn't look good to potential customers just because of the absence of really good reviews with those crunchy bits of detail that people seem to love.
Exactly. Perfect. Let's move on. I'm going to skip one and just move into, which I think is really another kind of straightforward but worth addressing, is this having customers write reviews at the location of the business. So like in a doctor's office, why might that be a bad strategy or not a bad strategy?
Very simple. All filtering and legal issues aside, people are in a rush. People, if you're done this is very common at like dentist offices, for example. If people just had their teeth cleaned, or they have the rubber jaw from the Novocaine and whatnot, or they're bloody and they just want to get home and sleep, they don't want to write you a review. They don't want you even to ask. They are in a rush. They maybe were stomping on the gas to get to the office so that they don't miss their appointment. And then, of course, they're waiting in the waiting room, and the doctor is 15 minutes or 45 minutes late. And by the time the appointment is done, they just want to get out of Dodge. They don't want to write you a review. And if they, on the off chance they do, it'll be a rating only, where they select 5 stars or 3 stars, who knows, and don't actually explain the review or explain the rating. Or it'll be, again, eBay length, eBay style review, where it's like, great service, A++. Like, that's not very helpful. So the point is, if it works well, if it doesn't work well, you've got a problem. Right. If it does work well, you've got a bunch of perfunctory short reviews that aren't very helpful, and that as soon as people read them, they're like, okay, I get it. They have a lot of good reviews. I still don't know why I should go there. So that's the biggest problem by far. The other issue is some people will feel, not all, some people will feel as though you're breathing down their necks. If it's like, here's an iPad, review us. It's hard. The reason that sometimes works well is it's hard to say no. And the reason it sometimes blows up in the business owner's face is it's hard for people to say no to that. So it can, unless you just tiptoe around. It's hard to do that in a non-pushy way. You also, as they say in Washington, D.C., you have to think of the optics. If you're another patient or customer or client and sitting there and you hear people, while you're in the waiting room, the staff is asking people, hey, can you write us a review? Hey, can you write us a review? Here's an iPad. Can you write us a review? You have to wonder that you think, hey, is this how they got all those good reviews I read about online before I came in here? Something's up. If none of the reviews seems spontaneous because you've determined people are asked while they're in the office and they just dash out these reviews, some of the magic dies.
Right. And that's why, before we move on to the next strategy, that's why, with us, you still want to ask, you still want to mention the idea, plant the seed, but then if you have their email address, that's when you just do a follow-up email when they're in the comfort of their own home, send them to the review funnel and just say, hey, we appreciate your business. Now you're home. We take a moment to maybe leave us a review. It would mean a lot to us and help other customers evaluate us.
That's exactly what I recommend to people. Recommend to clients who make in-person contact and then presumably have the email address. Plant the seed of the idea. Get them to get kind of a tacit yes or no, and at least then the email will not come out of the blue. And you can also sniff out whether the customer or client or patient is happy or lukewarm or foaming at the mouth. And so asking in person and not having the potential reviewer review you on the spot is just a way to, again, sniff out people before you ask for the review. If they do it on the spot spontaneously, great. Don't stop them. Maybe you have an iPad for people who say, yes, I'm glad to review you. Do you have an iPad I can use? And you say, well, why, yes, we do. But don't, that shouldn't be your default. And as you said, a lot of the heavy lifting, the actual phrasing of the request should happen in that follow-up email that people kind of expect to see maybe as soon as they get home.
Exactly. So moving on, this is a big one, which I think is really interesting and nebulous too, but it's the whole idea of schema markup. So is it a bad idea or bad strategy to mark up all your reviews with schema? Because we know the value of schema in terms of getting those juicy stars on your organic search engine results.
In my experience, it's not a bad idea. In my experience, though, the stars aren't that juicy. They're like a stick of celery that's been left in the car for a couple of days.
Oh, they're better than that.
They can be. I have not noticed that as soon as if and when you get the review stars, which, by the way, is not a given. Google has a whole algorithm that decides whether you get the review stars or not. And it depends on the page, and it also depends on the type of review star. You can basically mark up one review, so it looks like you have all of one customer, or you can mark up, you can use aggregate schema and mark up 500 reviews. And obviously one of those is more impressive than the other. But I have not noticed, maybe I haven't paid close enough attention, but I have not noticed a lift for my clients in terms of click through in the search results when they have those juicy review stars showing up versus when they don't. Doesn't mean it's not there, means I have not seen a dramatic difference.
Right.
And I think that's for a variety of reasons, and that's probably for a whole other webinar. But I don't think there's any downside to it. I mean, if you have, as I know Grade Us has, a kind of a way to do it easily, just do a little bit of drive-by schema markup.
That's the key, is automation, right? It's like anywhere you can save time. Otherwise, what are you going to be coding every single review that comes in?
Well, yeah, because I'd rather have some way to do it kind of drive-by style rather than hand coding. I mean, I used to do that for clients. I don't know that it was worth the effort. I probably wouldn't recommend doing that today, probably because there are a lot of ways you can mess up your schema markup and for reasons technical or algorithmic, not get your review stars. I mean, if you're good at hand coding the schema reviews, more power to you. If you can do it quickly and actually do other steps in local SEO and marketing and not have that be your big thing for the quarter, where you spend all your time marking up the reviews, then great. But if it should not be high up on the priority list. I just haven't noticed a lift from sub pages, because it can only be the subpage on your site because the homepage can't get review stars. I haven't noticed any lift from that. And if anything, it kind of hems you in a little bit as to what you can do with those reviews, because Google has very, very narrow specifications as to how you need to present the schema marked up reviews on your site. And if you present them that way, you can't necessarily make your dream reviews page. You can't cherry pick your reviews and only put the greatest hits on the page. You can't I don't know that you can add things like internal links, where if somebody mentions a service in the context of a glowing review, you link to it. I've never tried marking that up. Adding internal links to a schema marked up review. I suspect that would break it. I'm not certain. Mixing photos into your reviews. If you have a page on your site with a bunch of impressive reviews, and the most impressive review is long, you may want to break up the sea of text with a photo. And the point is, with all the things you can do with your reviews, if you're hemmed in by the schema markup, you can't necessarily do all those things, and you may not be able to extract the maximum, wring all the benefit you otherwise could out of your reviews. So for that reason alone, I would say it's not bad if you can do it easily, but most businesses have bigger fish to fry.
Agreed. Okay, so here's a big one, which is kind of a no-brainer, but I just wanted to throw it out there, is the buying good fake reviews for yourself or buying bad fake reviews for your competitors.
If it doesn't work, then you have problems. If it works too well, you have problems. Plus, it's illegal. And I mean, especially buying for every one business that buys bad fake reviews for the competitor, there are probably 55 businesses that just buy good reviews for themselves. I think that's because most people aren't even unwise business owners. Yeah, even the subset of business owners who are unwise, most of them are not malicious. Some are, of course. I'm not pretending they don't exist, but most of them aren't malicious, and they just want their big issue, that the burr in their saddles, is that they have not been able to get happy customers to speak up and write good reviews. So they try to buy them. The trouble is the reviews look fake most of the time. Because people have pretty good BS meters, and if you read enough 5-star reviews of a pest control company, your BS meter starts to smoke a little. and the trouble is also you're setting up a showdown where eventually you buy the fake reviews and it's like, okay, I'm all set. I have enough reviews, good reviews on Google or elsewhere to get a pile of customers. If you're not a 5-star business and all of a sudden the real customers write you reviews and they're not glowing, people will see the difference. They'll be like, okay, this person may be a real customer. She left a 3-star review. This kind of vague, mushy review is 5 stars. That doesn't look like a real customer. Something's rotten in Denmark.
Right.
Yeah. So you set up a clash with reality once real customers eventually do review.
And Sherry actually has a really good follow-up question. Like, so when you have a client, how would you respond, or could you comment on these businesses that are popping up that are actually selling bad review removal? Like, how would you address that? Have you seen these?
Well, I've seen some of them. I preface this by saying I have not seen their work up close and personal that I know of. Maybe there was some terrible business I was looking at, and I just didn't see their bad reviews because they were removed post facto. I have no idea. My question would be, well, for one thing, it is a missed opportunity, as we said earlier, because you the business owner can impress people with your good reviews, or you can impress them with your good reviews and your bad reviews. How you deal with the bad reviews can say a lot about you. And if the bad reviews aren't that bad, if they're just, people have silly complaints or just crazy people are the only ones who leave you a bad review, then that you automatically look better in a way that the business with a perfect 5-star average just can't. So it is a missed opportunity there if you're trying to, kind of clean up the bad reviews post facto. It's one thing if they were written by competitors who are, just trolling you, basically. The trouble is Google, I'm only mentioning Google in the context of not rules, but rather just kind of policing. Google doesn't do a good job of removing reviews, and other sites don't either. Yelp is kind of an exception in the sense that even though their enforcement is very lumpy and uneven and a lot of times unfair, it is possible to get reviews removed under certain circumstances. I've been able to get many reviews removed on Yelp that are, just obviously violating one policy or another.
Facebook is impossible. Like, you cannot get
forget it. You can't. So my question would be, what magical pixie dust does the reputation management company have that allows them to remove the reviews? They can't. They don't have some inside track with Google. Certainly not with Facebook. They have very little in the golf bag, and there's just nothing they can do. So I would not even bother. I'd be interested in hearing firsthand experiences of people who've actually used one of these outfits and say, yeah, they were able to get all these reviews removed on a variety of sites. So not just Yelp, not just Google. I'm very skeptical, but I'm open to new data on them at the same time.
Well, it's funny. We recently did a blog post about what is reputation management, and was talking about that whole idea in general of, like, reputation management historically was this reactive crisis management thing where it was either, when it comes to negative content online, it was like suing the company that hosted it, which is a different animal than the review sites. But it was, like this kind of fake, snake oil kind of salesmanship where it's like they're promising to get rid of things by, if anything, just pushing down the negative comments with positive reviews. And like with positive content. And that's kind of where, we are now, where it's like the best thing to do is be proactive and generate positive sentiment. Well, obviously running a good business, but like work on building up your positive reviews. So when you do have a few negative reviews, it makes you look more real. And the way you respond to them is important, and you show yourself as a professional, but also that you're not killed when the negative reviews do come. So you're not in that position in the first place. We're getting to the end. So I did want to get give people an opportunity to ask Phil any questions. It's about 3 p.m. Eastern time right now. If not, we have two more that we could dive into. I got to work on my webinar time management. But,
oh no, that's all on me. I tend to.
No, you're the man. This is such good stuff.
go long. Yeah. I actually, in fact, we've covered so much ground. I probably have to plug in my laptop down to 9% battery. So I'm just going to be trying to get that done for just a minute. I don't want to cut out on you if we're still in the middle of talking.
You do your thing. We're all good. Sherry was just pointing out that most of these companies are advertising that payment is only due if they get the bad reviews removed. So Sherry, to that point, like Phil, I'd be interested to know like their case studies or examples of anyone who's used that service to see how effective it was. Because that's an interesting sort of like guarantee or proposal. I wonder if the whole thing is a scam to begin with, because knowing how these review sites operate, nobody knows the magic trick to removing reviews, as far as I know, that don't explicitly break a terms and conditions within a certain review site.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not sure that was a question phrased for me, and I think you answer it better than I could. But yeah, I mean, if the payment is contingent on removing reviews only removing the company's ability to get the bad reviews removed, then that's a problem for them, because they are going to have a low batting average for the most part. Because the sites with good quality control, have their own oversight, and they will not remove a review just because you reported it. You asked them nicely to. And the review sites with no oversight don't care, and nobody, whoever's there is asleep at the switch. So, I think the strategy on the part of the reputation management companies is, we have these other things to sell you. One, people come for the bad review removal and end up staying for the other thing we offer. So they're sort of dangling it in front of the would-be customer, like, hey, we can get some of your reviews removed. And that may be true in some cases, but because the batting average is so low, they have to have something else to offer. So I think it's tantamount to a loss leader, where people just come in for one thing and end up staying for another.
Exactly. Okay, so I had a question come up from Vic, which I think is a good one. I'd love to hear your perspective, aside from the bad strategies. He wanted to know, what is the most effective way to get reviews? Would you say, is it by sending emails versus sending text messages?
It's a total case-by-case thing. I did a post about 3 or 4 years ago on it's called something like 65 ways to troubleshoot your review strategy. And that's one of my posts with, I think, a better shelf life. So I think probably 55 of the points are still valid. There are a lot of considerations. Text does not seem to work well for the same reasons that asking people in the office or in the waiting room or wherever also doesn't seem to work well. People are in a rush. If I get a text, I'm probably in the middle of something else. I'm probably not just sitting around on my phone whiling away my life. Some people are, but typically they're on the go. They're either using the phone, or the phone is on the nightstand, or the phone is in their pocket, or they're driving, or they're at work, or they're asleep. So the texts don't typically arrive when it's convenient. And also, if you want reviews that have detail and say specifically why people should work with you, and you want those crunchy bits of detail, do you really want people to be like, this on their phone, trying to tap out a review kind of when they're on the fly, when they can't really type? Yes, people of a certain generation are remarkably good at typing on the phone. Granted,
that's what I would say. It's generational.
It's generational. Yeah, I suppose it depends on what your business is and how many young'uns you have in your customer base. Now, trouble there is the reviews a lot of the time look as though they were dashed out on the fly, on somebody's phone. And so they don't look well composed. Now, I think you want both. I did a post, I think, last year about like what is the perfect stack of online reviews. So some are long, some are short, some are detailed, others are very terse, kind of Calvin Coolidge length, minimalist reviews. You want all of those. You even want a few 4-star reviews.
And they need to be recent. I mean, that's the thing is like, if you've ever actually used reviews to evaluate a business, the difference between a review left in the past month versus like 5 years ago, or like even 1 year ago is really has an impact on how valuable they are.
It sure does. And even then you want both. So you want people to be able to scroll back and see, wow, these guys have done a great job for years. It's not like they just learned about reviews or they just opened up their business and it's sort of the honeymoon period. They have good old reviews and good new reviews. So I would say, experiment and find what works for you. I have found that the 1-2 punch of asking in person and then following up by email at least once, maybe twice, probably not 3 times because people will get sick of you. That's usually the best. That's usually the best approach that's worked for my clients. But your mileage may vary. So try the text approach, but also have it on a short leash in case it just doesn't seem to work out. Because I think you may just have better results with kind of old, crusty, unsexy email rather than sort of the elegant text solution.
And I would say that also just speaks to the, most of us who are in this kind of local marketing type of business where it's just like test, see the results. If the results work, go with it. If they don't work, try something else. And I think that's a great strategy when it comes to reviews. It's really just test different messaging and see what resonates with people. We had one more question.
And then test, then use more intuition and then test. So don't test blindly, but don't just operate on your gut feeling either. Do both.
Exactly. Last question before we call it a day. And this is kind of a big one, but Diego just wanted to know, how much value do reviews have on local search results?
It's incalculable, partly because who the hell knows? I'm not Google, but they are the one, even if you have nothing else going for you, in your local SEO campaign, they can be your one saving grace where your ranking, however good or bad your rankings are at a given time, reviews can get you customers. So if your rankings are bad and you're able to piece together a few good reviews and people see them, you have the ability to get some customers out of the deal, assuming the reviews are good and again not just minimalist without any helpful detail. Now, if and when your rankings do get traction, the reviews will really help you because they will be visible and you'll get more people, and those people will be predisposed to write you reviews. In terms directly of how reviews help your rankings, it depends if we're talking about Google or we're talking about local directories. On local directories, I studied this and did a post on this a number of years ago. Usually the top ranked business within a directory has the most or best or both reviews. The categories also matter, the name also matters, but in Yelp, whether it's Yelp or BBB or Angie's List or Yellow Pages even, or Hows or Health Grades, it's usually the business with the best pile of reviews that ranks well within that directory. And of course, those sites tend to rank well themselves within Google. So there's this whole concept of barnacle SEO, where you kind of get visible within the sites that are visible within Google. And reviews are by far the best way to do a little bit of barnacle SEO. Then there's the question, well, how do they help your Google visibility? I would say only insofar as they drive click-through. So I don't know, and maybe to the extent that you can get, quote, keywords in reviews, but you should only do that by just encouraging people to go into detail, not by telling them to use certain keywords. So, what they say in the reviews, the Google reviews, does seem to matter to some extent for what you, it does seem to matter to some extent for your rankings. And especially if you rank for a term and you have reviews that mention that term, Google will a lot of times excerpt that review and stick it on the local map and say, you know, they'll basically quote somebody's review. So, you know, that kind of thing can help drive clicks, which in my experience can, over time, indirectly help your rankings. But I would not say,
right? In just the sense that
yeah,
I predict that Google would depend more on keywords in the reviews to serve up a local business in a local search. However, to your point, you can't really ask for keywords in the reviews because then you'll get inauthentic reviews that, you know, defeat the purpose anyway. So it's like, it's kind of a two sides of the coin situation.
Exactly, and people will catch you with that if they see reviews that all sound like they're written by the same person because they all use the same keyword. That's going to look weird if it works, and if it doesn't work, then, you know, what are you doing? It's a waste of time. And also, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for you to learn the keywords people actually do use, rather than the keywords you assume they use. I mean, so one way I love to research keywords is just to look at the reviews and see what terms people use. Sometimes they're made up, sometimes they'll be incorrect, but it's a reflection into, you know, how people actually search. And there are probably more people like the reviewers who use this, I mean, if a reviewer has an odd way of referring to your business or your service, there are probably others like him or her. So again, it's the reviews can be kind of a listening post if you just let people use their own keywords. And, you know, you can get them to use more of kind of the keywords you want if you just encourage them to go into detail rather than make it sound too easy and as though, oh, all you have to do is spend 90 seconds to write us a review. You know, again, that's good if you're just trying to up your body count, but it's not so good if you're trying to get reviews that really impress people.
I think that's a great point. It's just the whole idea of, like, you know, you want an authentic review anyway. So just asking someone to share the details as opposed to trying to kind of like guide them a certain way is going to be more effective. One last thing before we go, Diego just mentioned, does that also apply to the local search 3-packs? I know because you see the Moz local ranking factor talks about, we all know proximity is number one, which makes sense, and you have no control over in terms of what gets served up in that local pack. Do you think, I mean, we see that people imply that reviews are a ranking signal in the 3-pack. Do you think that's the case, or are you skeptical?
I'm skeptical. I mean, I can only go off my experience, having done this for more years than I care to count. You know, once you get a few reviews to your name, especially, again, if they're relevant, not just perfunctory little snippets, that seems to help your rankings a little bit, but then very quickly you hit a wall, and which makes sense because anybody can rustle up 10 reviews by hook or by crook. Doesn't mean you're a good business, and it doesn't mean you should rank for anything. Now, if you keep getting the reviews over time, you keep piling them up, not only on Google, but also on other sites. However well you're doing in the search results, you're going to get more click-through. And that seems to help your ranking. So again, what I say to people when they ask the very same question about, you know, to what extent do Google reviews help rankings? I say, basically all the benefit is indirect. Either you're getting keywords in the reviews, people choose to like mention keywords in their reviews, or you have so many reviews and so many more reviews than your competitors have that you get all the clicks. However you rank in the search results. And Google, because Google is creepy big brother, Google knows who gets the most clicks. And Google, you know, tends to reward you or ding you accordingly. And that, by the way, is one reason a lot of times you see a business come out of nowhere and rank well in the search results and then drop like a rock. Usually, you know, Google seems to operate on the principle of, okay, we'll give a new business a crack at good local rankings. And if they get good clicks, we'll keep them around for a while longer. If they don't get any clicks, well, maybe not. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they get the cement overshoe treatment. And it's the same with reviews. I mean, if you keep working up the reviews and keep getting higher and higher click-throughs, that will help your rankings in time. Or at least that's that's what I've observed with clients and other businesses.
And that's all we can do with Google is really just observe and experiment and try to infer. But most times correlation doesn't, it's not causation, it's more correlation.
Exactly. And the other thing I tell people just very quickly is, even if Google reviews do not help your rankings one pinch, you still want them because you still want people to be impressed whenever and wherever they see you in the local results. So it doesn't matter if they help your rankings. They seem to, but get them anyway.
Exactly. Well, Phil, thank you so much. This was wonderful. I always love just talking to you about local search. We're both guys who love the industry, who love like seeing what's going on, whether it's positive or negative. I do appreciate your insights. I hope you'll join us again in the future.
You got it. Yeah, it was great. Thank you, Garrett.
Yeah, so we'll close out here. Anyone who does want to check out Phil's blog post I'll follow up with you, Phil, and get some of the blog posts that you mentioned, and I'll link those in the blog post where I put the webinar, so people can find those and read those if they want to come back to this. But on that note, we will end. This has been Phil Rozek at localvisibilitysystem.com. I'm Garrett Sussman, the Senior Content Marketing Manager at Grade Us. Hope you all have a wonderful long weekend, and thanks again.
Thanks, Garrett.